Good evening, everyone. Thanks for watching the Somerville Overcoming Addiction show. My name is Joanne,
Hi, I'm Judy.
and we have two special guests tonight.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We have Denise Sullivan, who is a family therapist, and we have MAaryAnne, that is a registered nurse. The reason why I had Denise come, and she came all the way here from Plaistow. They have a group up there that I've been mentioning on the show every once in a while, saying that I want to start it here in Somerville. And I just found out what the name of the group was. It's called Mercy Street. And I think that really fits, don't you?
Mm-hmm. I do.
The pastor who actually...
Aaron Goodrow, he's the pastor of the First Baptist Church. I met him when I came up from Florida about a year and a half ago. I came up here to work and open a treatment center in Concord, New Hampshire, and I'm very passionate about carrying a message of hope to families of addicts. I've worked as a primary therapist working with clients, but I've also worked as a family therapist. And so I met Aaron and we talked, and I feel one of the problems that most addicts that I've worked with have is finding the spiritual part of recovery. And so Aaron and I, after we talked for a while, we decided we were going to do a group for families, addicts, and people who have lost loved ones to this disease. And we started it just over a year ago, and it's going strong. And what I see from it is a lot of healing and open communication between the family and the addicts. And the healing part comes in when families, I usually will have a speaker that will be in recovery, and the families get to know their children that they've lost or their loved ones that they've lost to this disease through listening to other people's stories. So this has been a wonderful
Oh, absolutely,
thing.
because I've gone 3 times up there and drove all the way up to Plaistow in traffic just to go up there and be a part of this group. And I really did enjoy it. The first, I think it was the first actually meeting that you had where you talked about codependency.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I wasn't able to come back for a while, but I thought, this is exactly what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I want everybody to be in the same room. I don't want just a group of parents, tough love and, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and tell this story. I want everybody to talk about what's going on in their lives. And the last couple of times that I went up there were people in recovery that were speaking. And everybody was overwhelmed for it. And the thing is that they felt the same way about going around the room. Everybody would tell them, their name and a little bit about themselves and what they've gone through. And it was amazing. And everybody felt very relaxed and learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some of the things that we do in the group, besides have a speaker, is we do psychoeducation around codependency, boundaries, enabling, and we teach people, or we educate people on how this all works and how the family needs to get treatment also, because the addicts will either get into treatment or they'll start into like the 12-step programs or whatever avenue, and they'll go back with the families, and the families still don't understand the disease. And so we try to educate the families so that they can go back home and be around the family and be able to communicate.
I think that that's amazing too, because what people do realize, but and don't in the same, is that this addiction it affects everyone, even pets. I honestly feel that
How do you think Stanley feels?
right.
She has a cat.
Right, but I'm saying that when they go in for these treatments, they're seeing a psychologist. They're getting all the things that they need, and then when they come back to us, well, first of all, we're on eggshells. We're completely traumatized of what has happened. If I feel that if your family actually let you back, I think you're blessed. And from what Joanne has told me, that she was just so amazed on the different characters of the people that were there, and it does make sense, because you have to, like, even as a community, a state, a community, we need to all come together, because it's bigger than all of us.
It is, and a lot of people don't understand it. There's a big stigma around addiction, and it's a fear-based disease. There's 3 aspects to it. It's mental, physical, and spiritual. And a lot of people, they poo-poo the idea that it's a disease. And if, the American Medical Association and the Psychiatric Association, say it's a disease. And it is. I'm in recovery myself. 42
years.
42 years. And I come from a family that is addicted. I lost a brother to a heroin overdose, and my father died directly as a result of alcoholism. And so I've had addiction in my own family all my life. And going through all of this, growing up, and then getting clean, and then getting into the field later on, I understand now how this disease works, and that's one of the reasons I got into this field. I had my own hair salon for 25 years before I went back to school to do this, and I went back to school because of losses in my own family and friends that I've, taken to meetings along the way, or worked with them in recovery, just so many losses. And so I really try to educate people and talk about shame, the shame that goes with being in a family of addiction or dysfunction, and how the learned behaviors that go along with this disease. A lot of times the learned behaviors, they come from our parents and our parents' parents. It goes back generations. So we have to relearn coping skills instead of reactive ways of dealing with the disease.
Well, years ago, when you went to a therapist, you were considered crazy. Right? No one accepted that. Now, at least it's a lot more open now, and there's a lot of people going into therapy. I would like to talk to MAaryAnne. Now, MAaryAnne was telling me something that was very, very interesting. I met her at the last meeting, and she's a registered nurse, and she opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I think it would be very interesting to hear her story, because she did a project.
That's how I came across Mercy Street to begin with. I was going back to school for my bachelor's, and so I had to do a project in the community, and I had to do some community nursing. So I chose substance abuse because it's huge in my life. I'm a nurse. I worked in the emergency room. I now work at the Veterans Administration, and I work with a lot of addicts and alcoholics. So it's something that I'm passionate about as well. I also have it in my immediate family. So I started out, it was with interviewing for this project. And so I interviewed Denise, I interviewed Aaron, I interviewed some of the people there, and I started to go to the meetings. And what I found was that it was just an incredibly moving experience, hearing from the addict side, the parent side, and how moved each person was when they gave their pieces. And so I've also, I've said to people on the outside of this, you can come to this group. I've invited people. I've known people that want to come and speak. I actually have another speaker for you coming up. So it's just it's an incredible group. There's a lot of learning and a lot of healing.
What people did you interview when you were doing your
So in order to find out the scope of how this whole epidemic is affecting people, I wanted to know, think of ways that I could help the community. So I went out in the community and I began interviewing everything from policemen to firemen to paramedics. I interviewed nurses, teachers, students, addicts, people in recovery, funeral directors. And my teacher was really amazed at that one. And I said, well, how could it not impact even funeral directors?
Right.
And when I did the one that's in town, he said, oh my God, it's rocking us. There's something to be said for little old ladies. We're not supposed to be doing this for 20-year-olds. And my business has increased 49% because of this epidemic. So that was really, really something for me to hear.
Huge.
That's huge. And he said, that's not what I want. So there's definitely some need for more of these groups to remove the stigma, to help educate people and find that community and that support in times of crisis.
Yeah, I was reading an article once online with of Ohio. They got hit really hard, and it was from a coroner. That they were actually, he didn't have time to do anything, so they were just writing like what he retired, he left. That's how overwhelming that it hit him personally. That there were bodies on top of bodies. So he said sometimes on the table there was 3 and 4 of them stacked high of kids. And what do they say that the stats were like 65,000 people died of an opioid overdose last year in 2016,
Well,
17.
it's actually 64,000 or whatever, but
yeah.
round it off to 65.
So it's what I read was 174 a day.
Yes, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, you get all these movements, everybody, you know, has a cause, everybody has a fight. The staggering numbers of people, and you know, people think of addicts like this person that's of an older age and just complete like bum on the street, and you know something, it's not. They're kids. They're just kids, and I just don't understand why people can't see that it's everybody's disease. It's everybody's family, and why aren't they coming out in the masses? And
there's a lot of people that I see fighting, and you know, a lot of in this group, there's parents that have lost children, and their drive and motivation to try to help, even if they can help one person in their area so that their child didn't die in vain, is so remarkable and so moving. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that what I see in the Mercy Street group is amazing, and I think that it's powerful, and I think it helps people. And from both sides, to see both sides.
That's what I'm like.
It
should be like a chain reaction. Like we, you know, bring it, start spreading it,
And that's basically what it is.
because you
when
do need to live with each other. Everybody needs to be able to talk to each other or talk to somebody else without having that, like you said, that hidden.
Well, one of the things that I see with families and with the addicts is this disease. There's a lot of denial, there's a lot of rationalizing, justifying, you know, and there's a lot of miscommunication. And so we try to educate people about that, because what I see sometimes, and I've been working in this field since 2005 now, what I see is a lot of people will go to meetings or they'll go to therapy, but they might just go once or twice and think the problem is just going to go away. And I can tell you from my own experience and from working with others that this disease does not go away, that if you are an addict or an alcoholic, and you know, it will be with you your whole life. However, if you're regular with recovery and what you need to do in recovery, then, and you stay with it, you learn coping skills that will carry you through, and you'll be able to live life on life's terms instead of not knowing what to do. But there's so much denial with the disease because nobody wants to be an alcoholic or an addict. And most families are ashamed too. They look at it like there's something wrong with them, or there's something wrong with their kid or their husband or whatever. And there is something wrong, you know, because you're dealing with a devastating illness. It's cunning, baffling, powerful, and insidious.
And some people don't want their children with your children. Too.
Right.
They like,
But
stay away from that kid.
The thing is, though, for both the families and the addicts, there has to be follow-through. Like these meetings, what I see sometimes, some people will come because their kid is in trouble or their husband is losing his job or whatever, and they'll come, but they don't stay long enough to really have it really work for them in their lives. But the ones that do come regularly and contribute to the group and stay around long enough to learn about the disease, they seem to do a lot better at setting boundaries with their loved ones, not always giving in to them, because that's one of the other things. I think MAaryAnne can address that a little bit about the enabling. What did you experience with that?
So, yeah, I had to learn from the group and with lots of support what the difference was between enabling someone and boundaries, because I couldn't, like I said, it's affected me and my immediate family. And so I would always think, you know, if I paid that bill for them, then they'd get their, you know, life back together. Or if I did this, and it was just this constant thing. And what's so sad about the disease is it will take everybody down. That's, you know, you try. I lost sleep. You know, always waiting for that phone call and so many things. So what I had to learn was to set the boundaries and to love enough and detach to say, you know, I'm here if you need me, if you want me to bring you to a meeting, if you want me to bring you to a detox center or something to help you, but I can't hand you money anymore. I can't buy these things for you. I can't pay your bills for you. I can't even have you stay at my house. If it meant that you're homeless, then you have to figure that out. And that's a really hard step for anyone to take. You know, but if you do that, then it gives them the opportunity to hopefully choose the right path for them to find their recovery.
And that's the other thing about this group, is there's no judgment, you know, because people have enough guilt. You know, guilt is one of the emotions that goes along with this also. And, you know, they think, well, if I don't do this, they're going to go out on the street, they're going to overdose and die, and then I'm going to feel guilty that, you know. But one of the things that we talk about in the meetings is the 3 C's. You know, you don't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. And I think sometimes people just hearing that, you know, some of the guilt is lifted. You know, I believe that an addict or an alcoholic is born an addict or an alcoholic. And I believe that a lot of the behaviors are handed down, and those things have to be addressed by both the addict and the family.
And you know, it's funny too, because saying that, I see that, I come from a family of addiction. I've seen it. Then it came down to me. Then it came down to my child. My grandson lives in a free zone. There is no addiction in the house with him, so he doesn't see it at home. He sees it outside. He sees, you know, he never really seen it with his dad. He sees his dad in recovery, and he knows that his dad struggles. He doesn't know his mom. He knows that she struggles also, that she has a disease, and it's different. It's different with Jimmy, because he doesn't accept like things that we would accept because we're used to having it for so long. You tend to find somewhere to put it. And little Jimmy doesn't, because he doesn't. It doesn't fit. It's like, what's that? You know, why are they doing that? And so it does make a difference. I do believe that, you know, to break that cycle, it's the hardest thing.
He's also one of our youngest.
Yeah. He's a
co-founders
very
of
bright, he's a
Somerville
good kid.
Foundation.
He's a good kid.
He always came to all the meetings, so I'm sure that
Yeah.
he's
he
very
knows.
educated, and he's going to help people later on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one of the things with families, even when there is not alcohol or drugs in the home, there's still things that need to be addressed. If you have parents that are in addiction or have
Right.
been in addiction or are in recovery, because it just doesn't go away just because someone stops drinking or drugging.
Oh, right.
You know what I
right,
mean? And
right.
so there's behaviors that need to be changed, and kids learn from their parents, you know, and so, you know, there's still a lot to learn.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah, one of the things they say in recovery is in order to stay in recovery is that you have to remain teachable. And there is, I mean, I can tell you after 42 years, there's still more for me to learn.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. It's a very complicated illness,
Yes.
and there's just a lot to learn, and you have to be careful about becoming complacent. You know, there's a lot more to the disease than just stopping
Yes.
drinking or drugging. People think sometimes, well, I don't need those meetings, or I
know
don't need
you-
therapy. I'm doing good. I feel good, you know, but it's a lie.
You
They're
do have to
lying
change. You have to
themselves.
change everything. You
Mhm.
do, even yourself.
I have an interesting story. The other day, I was on Facebook. It's either good or it's bad, you know that, how Facebook is. And someone said that one of my relatives had been rushed to the hospital and he had to be Narcaned. So I just nonchalantly said that, you know, if there's anything I could do, if I could help him or whatnot. It's like, I got an email saying, don't talk about my father like that. And it's like, well, it's your mother that put it on Facebook saying that he Narcaned, you know, had to be Narcaned. So doesn't that mean that he actually was on had an opioid in his system? And the thing is that a lot of people don't realize that that's the problem. It's prescriptions being given to you by doctors. And a lot of people are ODing because of that.
Do you know Dan O'Connor's?
I know of him.
Yes. We had him on the show once, and we did a topic of elderly abuse with opiates. Staggering. Staggering. We just had him recently back on the show. And he still inquires about that because he just could not believe the amount of prescription medication that older people take, and that they're not subjected to any different than the younger group. Because I had questions like, do they detox them the same? Do they put them in with the same? Because I know if I was 70 years old or 80, I would not want to be, you know, in a room with a 20-year-old. But he said, why not? Sometimes people feed off each other, and some people help each other in that type of way, and maybe that they're missing a child figure or they're missing an adult figure, and he goes, and sometimes it works. So I mean
That's why this meeting works.
yeah, and I think that
It's
was that amazed me, that it's all walks of life. There's nobody, because you must have siblings, correct, that come? Everybody, right.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, we have mothers and their kids. MAaryAnne's, one of her kids comes to our group.
Yeah.
Has spoken at our group, I believe. And yeah, there's a lot of family members. There was a man last week that had his son there. He's been coming lately. Yeah, there's all kinds of people in that meeting.
I remember the first meeting, like I said, you know, you had about codependency. And the person sitting next to me was a mother. And her daughter was homeless and not living at home at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but sitting next to her was her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very close to the daughter that, you know, was an addict that was in the street, and how overwhelmed she was because they were so close, and now she just didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so she had to work on that too. You know, there were tears, and you know, that's just, it's life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't just isolate yourself and put you in different groups.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work together.
It's
And
humanity.
that's what I'm looking
Right.
for.
And you know, and it's hard though too, because like being a parent and having your child suffer from addiction, and having other children also, that I found out, like, you know, through all these interviews that we do on the shows, of how hard it is for the other siblings to not have that attention, because the parents always, you know, always seeking out this one child because this one child's wounded and it needs all the attention. But meanwhile, you know, you
And the other is neglected.
and it's not intentionally.
No, we addressed that in this meeting. I do a PowerPoint on roles in the family, and how everybody has a different way of surviving in an addicted family, and it's really interesting because you know, I give a model for it, and it's really interesting how close it is, because there's usually 4. If there's a family of 4, there's a hero, there's a lost child, there's a mascot, and the scapegoat, and there's also an enabler, which is usually one of the parents, and then we go in a lot of detail about codependency and how that way of communicating is so dysfunctional. So we try to talk about positive ways of dealing with codependency. We talk about coping skills that we use.
Because codependency means, technical means what?
Well, codependency is 2 people. It takes 2.
Takes 2. Okay.
And it's pretty complicated to describe,
Okay.
but it's an unhealthy way of communicating.
Okay. So that could be between siblings, that could be between parents and child, or the parents themselves. Sometimes they feed off each other and then have all the kids, and okay.
Yeah, and it usually stems from way back, and if we don't change the survival skills
Right.
to coping skills, we bring that to our children.
Because it's almost like a Bonnie and Clyde kind of scenario where they just,
Well, a lot of times you just don't want to get them upset.
yes.
So what do? You turn around and you bite your tongue,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to see that rage. You don't want to upset them, but you end up being upset
Right.
all the time.
Right. So
Okay.
we talk a lot about people pleasing. Most people don't want to deal with conflict. So we talk about things like that, and we talk about, the whole group talks about how they deal with conflict, you know, how they deal with people pleasing, you know, and those are all codependent traits.
Right.
Well, it's a great thing, because now you have everybody's view, not just one person's
Right.
view of, you know, but talking about your life and what's going on. It's an education. There are some things that might be the same. You know, I was in a room with 13 mothers, and we all had the same story in the end.
Just different names.
That's right.
You know, like my famous last words all the time, because it never fails. This is bigger than all of us. Because just when you think you got it and you know, and you're like, okay, it just kicks you right from underneath your feet, and you're laying there, and you don't even realize that you're laying there for a little bit, and then, you know, it's like, okay, get up, regroup. A lot of people don't have that. They, you know, they don't have the stamina to fight it again. I know that in my many stints of recovery with my child, I used to whisper. People would be like, "How is your son?" I'd be like, "He's doing really good." I was afraid that the devil would hear me say that he was okay, and that they would come back.
Has it ever happened to you?
Wow.
That all of a sudden you say, oh, everything is great, and blah, 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 and then all of a sudden the next day
Boom,
something happens. Oh, you don't
boom,
want to say a
boom.
word.
So I don't say nothing a lot of
Mhm.
times. I just keep, because I'm like I said, they look around, they go, I'm like, oh, the devil will hear it. I don't want anybody to know.
Right.
You know?
Definitely.
We
you
were
feel the same way?
Oh, absolutely.
You see?
Absolutely. And you have to just take it one day at a time. That's the
That's right.
only thing that you can do.
Right, we take it minutes at a time sometimes.
I've been there seconds at a time.
Yeah.
And like I said, I see so much of it. I worked in the ER for 22 years, and like I said, one of my family members was struggling. And I actually had to get out of the ER because every time there was an overdose, my adrenaline would go up, and I would have to go in and just pull that curtain aside. And I didn't want it to be your child or your child or your child, but I didn't want it to be my family member. And I would close it, and I said, this is getting crazy. I have to get out of this. I have to get out of this career of mine because it was just overwhelming. And that's how I ended up going to the VA. And I love working with the veterans, but I see a lot.
Yeah,
I see an awful lot.
That's hard. Because they're almost like the forgotten ones. I mean, their system of healthcare is just so deplorable that's hard.
It is hard. It is hard to see addiction and alcoholism in anybody, in any family, any age. It can affect anyone and everyone. And I think it's important for us to have compassion and to not feel like it can't happen to you, because it can. And the bottom line is that nobody ever wakes up and says, I'm going to grow up to be an alcoholic. I'm going to grow up to be an addict. There's usually, from my experience as a registered nurse and doing this for over two decades, is that people struggle with depression, mental health issues, and those are the things, they're not taught good coping skills. They don't have them, whether they didn't learn them at home, or somebody wasn't able to show them healthier ways to deal with things, that then they found that they didn't like these feelings they had on the inside. So it was easier to turn to a substance because it shut it off. And one of the biggest things I tell anybody when they come for detox is, I say, I get it. You're trying to shut off all these feelings, but as you're shutting off all the bad stuff, you're shutting off the joy, and you're shutting off the happiness, because you can't feel anything. And
as a healthcare worker, also as being a nurse, I mean, it's pretty abusive. I mean, you guys get.
I can't say I've experienced it where I'm at now. It's amazing. I absolutely love my job, and I loved my job as an ER nurse. But like I said, when it got to the point where all these overdoses were just happening left and right, and it was impacting me because I was going through my own stuff. I had to change it, and plus I had enough of that.
Yeah, we had
20 years in the ER is enough.
We sat down. We had a meeting at Connections once, and there was a nurse that actually worked in the detox floor for years. Never saw it coming. She lost her child. Never saw it coming. And it just goes to show you that each and every single one of us, we're human. You just sometimes you don't want to see it. Like you said, you kind of break down, and you shut down, and then it's like it's not that you accept it. It's just that you don't want no waves. It's almost like at some point, how much more can you handle?
I have to admit though, like my oldest did have, they don't feel comfortable with themselves. So his thing would be to drink. He tried different things. But the opioid came into his life at 21 after a motorcycle accident, and not before that. And he didn't care for drugs. But when you're laid up for 12 weeks and they have you on OxyContin, you're addicted. And if you did have problems with, like a lot of people do, we're not obsessive, what is it? He what is the word I'm trying to find?
I don't know.
Excessive, when you do something.
Like OCD, like the obsessive compulsive, like.
Compulsive, that's it. We all have a compulsive, as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
I think we all are.
Yeah, that's the phenomenon of craving. That's the physical part. When somebody picks up a drink or a drug, they can't just stop. It doesn't just stop at one. You know, it keeps going because you have that craving once you pick
Right.
it up for more and more and more. And that's why you hear people talk about this being a disease of more a lot of times.
But the thing is, what they're doing is they
abstinence.
don't like who they are. They don't like what's happening in their lives. So if they have a little bit of alcohol or drugs, it dulls the pain
Mm-hmm.
of being the person that you are. Which most of the time, you're fine. You just don't feel good about yourself.
Correct.
Because that goes into the mental aspect
Exactly.
of health, and that a lot of people suffer from mental
And the fitting in,
illness.
because it's like false courage when somebody
Right.
starts drinking or they start getting high. There's some false courage there. Suddenly they're humorous, or they're a little bit more outgoing, and then they kind of get into this other, like this vicious cycle with other people who are struggling as well.
Right.
And before you know it, that's where you fit in. You fit in with that group of people who just constantly want to just numb themselves, and then once it becomes addictive, now it's just a matter of, I need to feel like normal. It isn't, I want to get high. It's, I feel miserable without this. My bones hurt. I've got goosebumps. I got belly aches. I got headaches. I got chills. I got tremors. This is not normal. And they have to get more so that all those physical
Right.
symptoms stop. And it's sad. So it's this vicious cycle.
So a lot of people don't understand what an addict goes through when they're detoxifying, and how painful it is.
Mm-hmm. Or how painful it is when they're actively using. When these people talk at Mercy Street, it's amazing because a lot of the speakers have talked at, whether it's an AA meeting or they've talked at NA meetings, but once we go around that room and we do that introduction, they change how they tell their stories because they see it maybe from a mom's perspective or a dad's or a brother's or a sister's, and suddenly they're not just talking to a bunch of people that are struggling just like them, they're talking to people that really don't even understand it. They don't get it. And so it's really very powerful when they start talking, and especially I see it the most with the parents who've lost children, because that's got to leave such a void in their heart. I don't know, I hope I never know what that's like. I tell them all the time, I don't ever want to join your club.
I think sometimes they get angry at.
But right,
Right.
in these meetings, help them to understand, like, oh my God, that's where my kid's head was at, because you're so caught up in the craziness of trying
it's
to control
crazy.
it,
Yeah.
and you cannot control it.
And even the
We
people,
just would like to take them and hold
Handcuff
them
them,
and take
handcuff
And-
them
and
to the
put them in-
lolly column
And put them in the
basement.
closet and have a cold storage room with a lock on it. There you
well,
are.
I've heard all the speakers that come in that are in recovery, they say that when they come into that room and they sit there, and I think you've heard this, MAaryAnne, that there's an atmosphere in that room that you just, it's something different than other places that they've been. And what happens is when they listen to the families, they understand the families more and what the families have gone through.
Right.
You know, I've had people after the meeting say, I'm going to go home and call my mother.
Oh, right.
know what
Oh,
I
my
mean?
God. But that must make you feel like $1 million because that's what the accomplishment is, right?
Every week that I go there, it just is, it really warms my heart. It's really something special. And even Aaron says the same thing. It's the highlight of his week. You
Nice.
know, even when I work with clients and, you know, I'm out in the community, this meeting is just special.
Well,
I
you-
can't explain it. It's something
you
you
know,
just
and
can't explain.
I was thinking too, you know, because I mean, I've been to a few AA, I've been to a couple of NA meetings and stuff like that. And it just seems like, you know, when you're sitting there and you're hearing somebody else's story, you know, it compares a lot to yours. And so, yeah, you're giggling and stuff, you know, because of the crazy things that you've done and they've done and this and that. But I would think that at your meeting, it would be a way different because now you're actually sitting there, like you said, you're talking to a mom, to a dad, to a brother, to a sister, to an uncle that's not suffering from addiction, that is hurt beyond hurt, and to see what, you know, to put your mother's or your brother's or whatever's face on that person that's sitting there, like, you know, wouldn't it be nice if you could actually sit there and have a conversation like that without being worried about offending, hurting? It's just amazing. I'm going to have to come out and see one.
Yeah.
You'll love it.
You're right.
Definitely.
I had Boy Scouts, because I'm a busy girl. My plate's always full, but I'm trying to separate and like juggle stuff, move stuff around, because, you know, Jimmy's getting older now and stuff. I get a little bit more freedom, you know, to do what I need to do.
Well, it's a serious meeting, but at the same time, we have a lot of laughs. We have a lot of laughs and a lot of cries during that meeting. It's very moving.
You must have a lot of emotions in that room. You must go right through all the whole 9 yards of them. What's it, like 7 of them? And that's amazing.
More than once, whether it's family or speakers have said the energy in this room and the emotion, it's palpable. Like, you can just feel it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I always thought that, this is my theory, is that when you bring everybody together, and if you do have your child there that's an addict, then they can't talk to you the way they would like to. But if they hear someone else talking about the situation, maybe it will get them closer to work with each other, to come to an understanding, you know. And that's how I felt. Or maybe they're not able to talk to you, but they'll talk to someone else in that group, you know. That's why I wanted to have a group like in this idea.
Yeah, they usually stay afterwards. It's hard to get the doors shut when we leave, because everyone usually stays around afterwards and talks a lot. But I was just thinking about, who was I thinking about it? We talked about earlier, a person that comes to, it slipped my mind. I can't think of it right now. Maybe it'll come back to me. But I just see a lot of healing there, a lot of healing in that group.
And the meeting is an hour and a half. It starts
It's
at
an hour.
7 and
It's
over at
cleansing of the
8:30.
soul. It's like telling people your secret, you know. And I say that it's just your secret. Everybody else knows it, but to actually come out and be like, blah.
Yeah, I just thought of it.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
So we had a speaker a couple weeks ago. Were you there? Were you there on the anniversary of the group, where there were a lot of people there?
Yeah.
Okay, so the speaker that night talked about being homeless and living in, like, Boston. On the streets, you know, in a cardboard box and the whole 9 yards, and people walking by him. How did he say it?
He said, like, and they would, like, look right through me, like they wouldn't see me. And, you know, he would look at them thinking, how do these people function every day, get up and wear their suits and go to work? And he was stuck in where he was.
Right, and someone else from the group who didn't know years ago, but now has been educated through this group, said that, you know, he was one of those people that would walk by, and he was ashamed to say it.
Apologized. It was.
Oh
it
my
was
goodness,
incredibly
no,
moving.
sir. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, everybody learns from each other.
Right. Could you imagine, like, touching a base like that? That's huge. That's great.
It is very, very moving.
It is. It's the perspectives.
You know, unfortunately, it's kind of far from Somerville to
You
come
got to
in there.
just create one here.
And that's what I
Yes.
want to do. And I've already talked to Denise, I don't know how many times, I've got to get that here, I got to get it in Somerville, and we are going to have it in Somerville.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I offered to come down and help get it started. So
yeah, she did.
all you
And
have to
now
do
I'm
is
just
call.
Actually, I think it was Shannon White said that that her church is in down by Assembly Square. It's called the Assembly Square.
Oh, yes.
And
It's
that
right by the
her-
99.
That her pastor
Would
would
help.
come on the show and would possibly help. So
Right.
we'll have to work on that.
I bet a lot of pastors would be more than willing, because I'm sure their congregation has several people that come to them when you just feel so helpless, like you can't talk to anybody.
Right.
A lot of people will turn to their pastors.
Right.
So I think it's a great opportunity for pastors to learn and start a group as well,
Yeah.
and find a lot of healing.
You
and
really would like
education through it.
Aaron too.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, his wife comes to the meetings as well.
Yeah.
I just got to meet her the last time I was there.
Yeah.
And,
And Aaron does a vigil the third Sunday of every month. And originally, I think that's what happened. I think I went to a vigil, and that's how I met him. And he has so many people in his congregation that have died of heroin overdoses or, you know, drug-related or alcohol-related things that that's how he got involved in it. There's a great community up there of people who have lost their kids that are advocates for recovery, and they go down to Washington. They help with.
And now this is up in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Because you know what people don't realize is that, you know, when you live in the city, we live with so many people in such a small area that when you go out up to New Hampshire and things like that, that you have to realize that they break themselves down into like little like towns, and they might have 200 kids. And once that epidemic comes and sweeps through there, the amount of children that are lost is great, because that's half of the school. And it was just a thought.
I'm glad you're thinking.
Yeah, it was a thought. I mean, it's just so heartbreaking, and so
No, it's a yo-yo.
It is.
It's
and
actually, I think,
just
roller
when you
coaster.
think you know nothing. You know absolutely nothing. You're right down to square one again, starting off again.
Yeah, we've been there a few times.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that when I'm down, she's up. When she's up, I'm down. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah, we've
kinda
never
balance
experienced anything like together, so it's always been helpful to, because I mean it's, and absolutely no joke of like fight for life. It's a fight for life, and I love saying you can't make this shit up, because you can't. You try to explain to somebody how. I don't even explain to him anymore because I can't. I can't think of the words anymore.
For
Right.
the past year and a half, I've gone to meetings about what we're going to do about this epidemic. You know, what are we going to do in the schools? What are we going to do in the police department? What kind of group are we going to have? You know. One time I said, well, why don't you have angels? I think that every police station should have recovery coaches. Okay, I think that every hospital should have recovery coaches, and every salon should have a drug court.
You know, it's interesting how you say that. So when I did my project, one of the things that I discovered when I interviewed some police officers, I was a little bit upset because they had such a terrible stigma, and I said, you're not going to arrest your way out of this situation. I had school nurses who, there's no drugs at my school. They were totally bamboozled, you know, so it's a matter of people got to really open their eyes, because
I think in schools, I think that they should have therapists and psychiatrists and people, nurses of that, so that when they recognize it, that it can be dealt with. There's a sign on a school that I seen that said 81% do not drink alcohol. And I'm like, so how many people are in your school? Because the 20% could be a lot of people that do drink alcohol.
See, I think every school should have somebody that is knowledgeable about addiction, and not every psychologist and not every doctor is knowledgeable about addiction.
Oh my
and
God,
I think MAaryAnne
so
can
right.
tell you that from working in the field.
Trying to find a family physician for my child was like pulling teeth. We went through so many of them, because the minute he said, they were like, all of a sudden they were a whole different person. And
Have you mentioned
he mentioned of the fact that imprisonment and addiction, they kind of didn't want nothing to do with them. We've been to 4 doctors like that. And then finally we found one that said, okay.
That's another thing. There are people that have come to our group who have been incarcerated and have become institutionalized. And the only place that they feel safe is at our group. It's, remember the guy that said that a couple weeks ago? But, you know, along with the addiction comes that institutionalization piece, and that's, you know, you really have to work hard on your recovery if that's the case. And I know from my own family, I've had people that have been institutionalized, and it's tough on the parents, really tough on the parents and the families when you see your kid who you know, put in Catholic school their whole life and brought them up well, to see them spend their life in and out of prison. It's, I can't even imagine.
Well, that's because that's how they dealt with addiction. They just put them in prison or put them in jail.
Yeah, that's a whole nother subject for me. I really believe in treatment.
Right. I mean, look at the girls in Framingham.
I've worked with the girls
That
in
was
Framingham.
that's shameful, that what they've done. And just as far as just putting them in there, just you know, no hope, no nothing, just get, you know, go in there, and that's that.
Well, you know, like, I don't know, in New Hampshire, I'd like to know, do you have, it's mandated in Massachusetts that each high school practices ESPRIT. Does that apply in
What do they practice?
ESPRIT?
What's that?
It's like, they take, right here we take the 9th grade, and what they'll do is they'll interview all the students, and they see which one that might possibly have a problem with substance abuse.
Oh.
And then they give them, you know, they kind of like try, you know, limited treatment. So they feel if they need treatment, that they would help them find it.
Well, I think kind of the trend now is harm reduction,
Right.
instead of putting people into like a treatment, and prevention. Prevention's another thing, that there aren't enough people that work in prevention starting at young ages, because some of the drug addicts and alcoholics, they start when they're like 7 years old sometimes.
Yeah,
You know
I was
what
going to
mean?
ask you that.
7 or 8 years old.
What is, and professionally, what would you say is like an age or a group age to start really talking to your children? Should you do it right through their lives, or
I would say yes.
right from the get-go?
I would say yes. A lot of these kids are exposed to bad behaviors of use, alcohol use, right at home from the get-go. So by teaching them at a young age, you know, not saying that they'd go home and call out mom or dad, but at least recognize, like, this is not how it's supposed to
Let me
be.
tell you, I was called out about cigarettes when Frankie was 7 years
Yeah,
old.
I've been
and how
I've
that
been
was gonna
called
have
out.
Cancer.
I've been called out too with my smoking.
And you know, that's why I quit. He was 7 years old. He came home and he said, "That's a disgusting habit. You're gonna die of cancer." Well, guess what? I stopped right there and then. Not because I was worried about dying of cancer, but the thing was that I wanted him to feel comfortable, and it helped me. So I did whole turkey, and Frankie would have been 40 right now. So we're talking 33 years I stopped smoking.
So girls, believe it or
Yeah.
not, we have less than 5 minutes left to our show.
I know.
It was a quick hour.
It was.
It really was.
And we didn't realize, we figured we weren't going to have enough to talk about.
So if
that.
people wanted to come take the ride up there, where is that located?
It's at the First Baptist Church, 122 Main Street, Plaistow, New Hampshire. And it's on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock, 7 to 8:30 p.m.
Do you have anything like Facebook or anything like that?
I usually post something on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I have a few pages that I posted
Yeah.
on.
And I mean, if anybody ever, you know, if you guys wanted to go and stuff, you can always message us on Facebook. It's Somerville Overcoming Addiction, and we could get you the address if you needed it.
It's on my page.
It's on Joanne's page.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
because I said that you were going to be here tonight, and where your group was, and the address, and and all that.
Mhm.
But we should put that back on Somerville Overcoming Addiction.
Mhm.
But like, we'll have one in Somerville, and not too long from now. maybe in a
Girls,
month
we
or two.
seriously thank you for taking the ride down here. I mean, that's a far ride.
No, it is.
Well-
I didn't
Yeah,
think
it's
it
a
was
far
bad.
ride up.
No,
it's
she's,
just 93 straight.
if you ever want to
95.
drive into Boston, she's the girl to drive in with, I'll tell you. She can drive and
good.
talk.
There you
Yeah,
go.
it's good. And
Yeah,
you know,
it was
I'm
great.
really glad that you had us here, and hopefully with the exposure, social media can be such a great thing. And you know, you get people on board thinking, wow, maybe we could have this in our town. Maybe we could have it in our town. Before you know it, there's a lot of groups
I'm
helping
kind
a
of
lot
hoping that a
people.
nurse and a therapist is watching this show tonight, and they're going to come and say, Joanne and Judy, let's do this.
Yes.
You know, because I think that's fantastic.
That's only half of it, though. Now we need a pastor as well.
Right. So
Mhm.
So
That's
if
the easy
anybody's
part.
interested-
that's the
Yeah,
easy
the
part.
pastor's the easy
God's
part.
I think so.
God's
Yeah.
always the easy part. You know, it's so funny. I remember at one point in time, I just walked out my back door. I opened my arms. I gave it to God because that's what somebody told me to do. They said, Judy, it's too much for you to handle. Give it to God. So I gave it to God, and I took it back. Then I gave it back, and I took it back again, and then I gave it back again. And it was like constantly, I swear to God, I was surprised like the lightning didn't come down on my back porch when he seen me coming out there. So I'd be like,
Is that
okay,
why
take
we've had some
it.
bad weather lately?
Yeah.
Judy?
Mhm.
All these storms. Did you
Right,
create
because
them?
it's like, there is a point that you have to realize that, you know, you can't do it on your own. You really seriously need
We
to,
all need each other.
you need each other. You
Yeah.
need to talk, and you need help. And the denial part of it is really great until it starts wearing on you. And then it's going to
And it
age you.
isolates you.
And then it isolates you. And that's like the first signs, too, is that you're not going out. You're not doing the things that you used to do. Not being non-social and being non-verbal. Just crying. I mean, God, I would be standing there. And I'd be like, don't look at me. Don't look at me. You look at me, I'm going to cry. I'm going to cry. And I cried. I think I cried a river for almost a year. I'm like, how much water can be in a person's body? I mean, it's hurtful. And then today, I had seen these two kids, adults now, that they've known each other since they were kids, and they haven't seen each other in a long time. And when they saw each other, they were so happy. They hugged each other and started to cry. And it was like, oh my God, everybody's gone. And it was kind of bittersweet because it should have been a great reunion, like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in so long. But yet it'd be like, and all of a sudden it just was like all these angels started coming.
10 seconds.
10
and the show's
seconds.
over.
Okay.
Mhm.
I just want to thank you both again for coming.
You're welcome.
And I'm glad you shared that story.